Actually, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio no pictures live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the cost to all our standards of living and incomes by affirmative action and diversity, equity, inclusion type policies. Now, we've never really sort of had a costing. What does it cost? What is the cost of all these things? Because once you put incompetent, unqualified, inept people in jobs, the job is done to a lower standard, the productivity declines, there's a lower output, and therefore a much higher proportion of wastage. And then we all pay the price for that. And I want to talk about declining productivity in a number of areas. So when manufacturing jobs get sent overseas, for example, to China or India or I don't know, Vietnam, anywhere, the productivity declines, the productivity of output declines. So in a first world country, one worker can manufacture 100, for example, I'll simplify it, can manufacture 100 widgets in a month because a lot of automation, robotics, and there's good roads, good transport, and this and that, and next thing. So one worker can manufacture 100 widgets in a month. But when you go to a third world country or the bottom end of a middle ranking country or whatever, then the productivity equation changes. The productivity suddenly is 1/5, 1/6, 1/10. So a worker, instead of producing 100 widgets in a month in, say, China or India or something like that, is only producing 10 widgets a month. So there's a very steep and very sharp decline in productivity of output. Now, the offsetting factor here in a globalist sense is, but those guys will work for cheaper a lot because they've got a much lower cost of living, and so they'll work for much cheaper. So when you rebalance it all, then the difference in productivity may not be that great. Maybe it's only the equivalent of if you allow for difference in costs. So in the West, one worker does 100 widgets, but it's only 10 widgets per worker in the other. But when you rebalance for the cost of wages and that arbitrage factor in there, it's the equivalent of that worker doing 50 widgets a month. So productivity still declined, but not by as much when you refactor in the actual costs of production. But in terms of productivity of output, efficiency, quality of work, quality control, standard of output, then there's a huge difference again, which you need to refactor back in. And I've seen this firsthand, many times over. So that when you save money by reducing quality of goods, and you have to replace those goods more often, then the productivity factor then goes back into reverse, and the productivity decline becomes marked once more when you take jobs away from the West. So that's one loss of productivity. Now, as more manufacturing gets sent offshore to lower productivity economies, where sometimes the wages are so low that you don't bother with any automation, you just have shitloads of cheap labor sitting there, literally cheek to jowl, with a soldering chips onto circuit boards and the like. So that's one loss of productivity. Now, on the other side is when more and more manufacturing jobs and production jobs get sent away, then the more and more those jobs are replaced with service jobs. Service, and say working in retail, working in take out food and cafes, coffee shops, baristering and those sorts of things. So there's been a large increase in services, and services by definition are much less productive because you have less control over the variables. If you've got a shop selling clothing, for example, you still need someone working in there, even though you don't know how many customers will come in and when and how long they'll be there, how much money they'll spend, these sorts of things. So the variability is you have to have a minimum cost base, but without knowing, and this is the variable, how many customers will come in and what they'll spend. A factory, on the other hand, or manufacturing, on the other hand, you have control over those variables, or most of them. the variable as to how much you will sell at the other end, that's moved out to the retail sector. But in the actual production side of things, you've got control of all those inputs and variables. In fact, the whole idea of efficient manufacturing and productivity output is to decrease, minimize, or indeed remove completely the variables. So the service jobs come in, and these are lower productivity jobs. So that's the next hit onto the productivity factor. The follow-on hit from that is then diversity, equity, inclusion, affirmative action, where jobs would be divided up on the basis of equity, a bit like a communist society where they would insist that jobs had to be for everyone. So they would just create jobs that weren't needed in order that everybody could pretend they were being employed. And as the Soviet, communists used to say, we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. And it was a sort of a dance macabre of mutual deception, where these jobs weren't needed. And they used to give fancy titles. So they would a woman who would fill out the how many widgets the factory made in Russia, for example, the Soviet Union back in the communist days, how many widgets the factory made, and she'd fill out the form to send into the central planning secretariat. That form would be sent in, and she was called an economist. That's not a fucking economist. it's just a clerk's job that isn't even needed. Anybody could do it, but that was the job she had. So she really only worked half an hour a day, but had to sit there for a whole day pretending to be busy and working and doing stuff and so on. So it was a pretend job and pretend requirements and these sorts of things. And that's what's happening in the West a lot. There's so many jobs that are sort of invented or created in the public service in particular to give to people from third world countries that are coming to Australia that aren't needed or wanted, have nothing to offer and contribute or anything at all. I mean, I suppose one or two of them must, but and jobs are invented for them. And any the public service is one major area where these people are. I've gone into public service departments where there's not a single white person working there, and you've got to be kidding. And also in any business, any company that relies heavily on government contracts, they're heavied relentlessly by the government and by the Black Rocks of the world to hire lots of black lesbians and so on. So you have a very high proportion of people, and I meet them sort of on a regular basis, these people who can't do their jobs for anything. I mean, their only concern is to race and gender hustle no matter what. We went into a company recently to do a talk through on, and I'll do another video on this, a talk through on like the details of a project. So it's quite a lot of technical stuff. And we were told that we had to go and first see this snot-nosed little punkette called Billie Jean. And she's just a snot-nosed little bimbo who's done her sociology course, firmly of the view that the world is awash with patriarchy, Nazis, and everything. And she claims it's a requirement. I'll wait for this. I mean, seriously, claims it's a requirement that all of us, and we're all straight white males, all of us must declare our pronouns. Must, not would you like to? Can we? We invite people to share their pronouns. No, you must. It is our policy. You can't even come in the door unless you declare your pronouns. And we knew this was nonsense. So I was there, and so I did my thing of, okay, well, we definitely want to adhere to the company's policies. Absolutely, those policies, and we want to be in 100% compliance with them. So just to make sure we're in full compliance, can you show us this policy in writing, because we want to comply with it. There was no policy. But it's just goes to show you the extent to which, as she sees, she's not there to do a job. She's not there to do any work or do anything productive or create anything. She's there to impose the radical end of the ideology that she's learned in high school and in sociology class. And being a bunch of men who are all sort of over the age of 40, straight white males all over the age of 40, then that's it. We're Nazis, and we had to be put in our place. And pronouns is a way to sort of put such people in place, as she would see it. But it was all a play. Nonetheless, so people like that are now, like her, are all over the place, and then there's the next level of productivity decline, whereas as cost of living increases, where the profits are washing into things like share prices and big property portfolios. That's where the ratio of wages and salaries, that's in as a percentage or proportion of the total size of the economy, is in a decline. Now, it started to go sideways in the mid 1970s, and it kind of drifted a little bit, slightly drifting downwards, nothing serious, until probably the early 1990s, and that's when the downward acceleration began. It wasn't sort of huge, but it was noticeable. And then in sort of around 2002, 2003, the decline picked up speed. And then after the 2008 sort of so-called financial crisis, the decline became quite sharp. So, and this is where the drift has occurred. So the next layer of productivity is as people are finding their wages are barely enough to just on an average wage, if you've got some shitbox 1-bedroom apartment you're renting somewhere, that'll take up 2/3 of your average wage. That's how far the cost of living has gone out. The equivalent of that, in 1975 would have been 17-18% of your wage would have gone on that sort of. Today it's 65%. That's been the massive difference in cost of living. So as more and more service industry jobs exist and more equity jobs are created where people don't really do anything, it's also a situation where the cost of living is such that their wages aren't enough for them to have any standard of living that's worth talking about. So they've gone as well. Why should I work hard? Why should I give a shit? And you see this everywhere now, whether at every takeout food store. And I've gone in saying, well, I just want to get the special of the day, and they don't know what it is. And I show them, on my phone, that's your company sending out these emails. This is the special of the day. This takeout foods shop, or indeed other shops. And they'll argue the toss. Oh no, I don't know about that. I haven't seen that memo. I don't care. And they'll argue with you that the staff in the company, in the shop, mostly women, mostly brimming with attitude, will decide they're gonna fight you every step of the way, and you just want to buy the special that the company itself is promoting. Not so bad when you move out of the sort of lower end of the retail section. There was an upmarket. Quite an upmarket retail company, and when I showed them what the special was, they were very apologetic. Sorry, we didn't get around to seeing that memo, and yes, can we help you, sir, and that sort of thing. So quite different. So it's really at the bottom. But where you've got that entry level wages, the people don't give a shit. Their standard of living is crap. That they can only exist day to day. So this is like the next level of productivity decline. So just from productivity alone, this is not including increasing prices. Just on productivity declines alone, my calculation, it's back of the envelope. I haven't done a deep dive and spent weeks doing heavy crunching of the numbers. The decline in purchasing power and the decline in our standard of living, I believe, up to about a quarter is down to these declines, these multi-layer declines in productivity, and so we're paying a huge price collectively for this. So that the problem isn't being, by giving these equity jobs and diversity jobs and affirmative action jobs, we're not solving anything at all. We're just moving the costs around. So the problem is simply being moved around, not being solved. Now, the solution would be, if black lesbians can't get jobs, the solution isn't to assume that it must be because of Nazis. The solution is to say, okay, how can we make you a productive worker? We'll give you free night school. We'll do what we can to help you, and those costs and expenses may be worthwhile, but you must meet a productive standard. And those standards have all gone, because diversity, equity, inclusion, affirmative action means there are no standards. Same goes for admission to college or even graduating into senior high school. To do that, they must have no standards or significantly lower standards. Or we see it in street riots, even, where if it's Black Lives Matter rioting, then that's okay. As soon as some white guy start to riot, Nazis, we've got to deal with. So these different standards are giving all of us a lower quality of life and a lower standard of living. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.